You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner, the Arsenal podcast.
I'm Martin Tyler, and you're listening to Harry Symeou.
Hello and welcome back to the Chronicles of a Gooner, the Arsenal podcast brought to you by the 90 Min Football Network. It's Friday. Happy Friday, although the sun has gone missing today. It's cloudy, it's gloomy, but there is plenty of positivity somewhere else in the country, a little bit further north. On this edition of the podcast, we are going to be discussing the takeover of Newcastle United. It's a takeover that has divided opinion. It's been a big story. It's been in the pipeline for quite some time. And yesterday it got over the line. I figured it's something that's worth discussing because of the implications it has not only on Newcastle United, but on the rest of the Premier League, on the footballing landscape. So there's lots and lots to get into. And joining me is none other than the brilliant Harry DeCosemo. I'm sure you recognize him from the show previously. He's a Newcastle fan, but he's also one of the most respected journalists out there when it comes to covering the Toon. He's everywhere. Harry, welcome, mate. It must have been a really crazy sort of last 24 hours for you.
I think my hair and the state of it shows how crazy the last 24 hours have been, Harry. Thank you very much for having me on. I'm looking forward to this.
No problem at all. We're looking forward to getting a bit more kind of insight as to what exactly has happened here. So what I want to do, and I don't want this to sound like I am digging out Newcastle United supporters, because that's actually or absolutely not what I'm doing. Okay, if I were a Newcastle United supporter after 14 years of Mike Ashley, I would be delighted. I would be chuffed. I would be thrilled that he's out of the club and somebody who is going to quite clearly have far more ambition is now at the helm. But I think speaking for the kind of wider football world, Harry, there are some questions that need to be raised around this. There are some discussions that need to be had. Now, first of all, before we get into that, before we dive into some of the kind of questionable things, as a Newcastle fan, can you kind of convey to us what it's been like under Mike Ashley's rule for 14 years and kind of shed some light on why people are so pleased and were jumping up and down and throwing things up in the air in celebration when it was announced that the takeover had finally been completed?
I think the thing for the best way of portraying it is that it's felt like nothing, like it's gone beyond misery of like and fear and worry and all that sort of thing. That with results and things, it feels like there's very little to if there's a win, it doesn't mean anything because there's a ceiling of just trying to survive. If there's a loss and they go and it puts them close to relegation, it sort of, what does it matter anyway because of the ceiling? Like there's nothing to really go for, and there hasn't really been much or enough, I think, discussion of what Mike Ashley's reign has meant. 2 years ago, before the Christmas before COVID, 10,000 Newcastle fans didn't turn up for a game against Southampton, and it was a big moment. It was like 10,000 fans had just turned away because they didn't feel like the club meant, and the club didn't care about them. Ashley didn't involve them in anything. It's kind of what, in a similar sense, what we're going to get onto in a different way in a bit with the new owners. But he didn't. There was just nothing about the club that the fans could connect to. Really, anything that they could was soon sucked out of them. So someone like Alan Saint-Maximin, for example, is a player that everybody loves. But if Mike Ashley stays, then eventually he's going to get sold, and there's no gap. And that's the plan. And in the last year, particularly while this takeover has been rumbling on, he's just not paid attention, and it feels like he's always been willing to gamble the club. So even though Newcastle haven't ended up like Sunderland or Bury or Bolton, which is what a lot of people put to Newcastle fans when they've complained about Mike Ashley, it's more about that he's been willing to gamble the club at every opportunity. He's done everything really cheaply. He's taken the fun out of being a football fan effectively, and that's why. And the club has been stripped back and just represented a business. It's not been worth effectively Newcastle, but Newcastle have been, yeah. Look at the picture. Newcastle. That picture was about 10. That picture was quite early on, actually. I think. But
yeah, because he's about 3 times the size of that now. So yeah.
I think in his early days he was kind of like a bit like happy-go-lucky about it. He was playing a bit of a role. He brought Kevin Keegan in. That's another thing about the takeover is that Kevin Keegan will be allowed back at Newcastle United, and I don't know who an equivalent. I guess Arsene Wenger, but in a way, his reputation has sort of taken a different turn with Arsenal fans. But imagine Thierry Henry didn't feel like he could come to the Emirates and wasn't welcome at Arsenal and was actively blacklisted by Arsenal, and just imagine how that would feel for the fans and feel for the club. That's kind of what we've been like with Keegan. Kevin Keegan is effectively like he gave birth to the modern Newcastle United. He put Newcastle United on the map, and he's not felt like he's been able to come to the club in the last 10 years because
why is that for those that maybe don't know?
He came back as man. So Mike Ashley played a bit of a role in his early days. He was a bit of a sort of like happy-go-lucky, as I said. He was going around at the away end, sitting in the away end, buying people drinks, wearing his shirt, trying to have it wasn't the ideal for a football club owner to act like that, but he was trying to. He appeared like he was trying to have a bit of fun with it, and he was going to really get behind it. Then he, having not done his due diligence on the amount of debt that Newcastle had, then he realised that, and then suddenly changed his tack. But also, he brought Kevin Keegan back in his really sort of happy-go-lucky attitude times, and then just mistreated him completely for 8 months. Lied to him, was proven in court by Keegan that the club had lied, and he'd been treated so poorly. A quick example is they tried to sign Luka Modric. Luka Modric's agent was sat around the table, a big fan of Keegan, was quite happily, talking the possibility of Modric joining Newcastle instead of Spurs. Mike Ashley's right-hand man comes in and says, "Oh, he's not big enough, he's not strong enough for the Premier League. We don't want him," and that was the deal done. And there was a lot of like murky stuff going on around that. Keegan was told to watch players on YouTube that he hadn't signed off on. They were players that were bought they were parked at the club as a favour to agents. This is the sort of thing that was going on in that time, and he basically sued the club and walked away and hasn't felt welcome back since. So my first thing that I would do if I was Amanda Staveley against Tottenham in a couple of weeks' time when the Premier League's back is I'd get Kevin Keegan on the side of the pitch before the game kicks off, because then that would really show that would represent best for Newcastle fans that previous owner is gone and there's a new era coming. Obviously, I agree with a lot of the questions that need to be asked, and there needs to be a discussion on lots of stuff, and I'm sure we're going to get into that. But the fans have a right to be happy that Mike Ashley's gone, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and listen, I completely agree with that. We know as Arsenal fans what it's like to have an owner that you don't feel has the success of the club at the center of everything that they're doing, and that they are financially motivated and only financially motivated. We feel that. So as I said right at the top of the show, this is not me in any way having a go at Newcastle United fans. I get why you guys are buzzing, and I think you've done brilliantly there in kind of encapsulating that for us, people who aren't Newcastle fans and are looking at this from afar. But as you mentioned, there are questions that need to be asked, and I'll just kind of give you a little bit of a download on how I feel about it, where I'm at, and then feel free to jump in, correct me, counter any of my points, because of course I haven't followed this anywhere near as closely as you have. And so I expect that there will be gaps in my knowledge. But the way this looks to me is that Mike Ashley has been very, very careful in the way he's operated the club over the last couple of seasons, knowing that this sale was something that he was going to try and force through. Obviously, he had guarantees somewhere along the line, or at least reason to believe that the Saudi-backed consortium were not going anywhere and that they were going to fight this with the Premier League. Now, at the time when it collapsed initially, there was a lot of talk about a number of different issues. Some of them were human rights issues, which many people in the chat are bringing up already. Some of the issues were around the piracy issue with the block on beIN Sports in Saudi Arabia, and there was talk that beIN Sports had kicked up a massive stink and fuss about it, and essentially, if the Premier League gave the thing the green light, they'd be almost or saying it's okay that the Saudis are stealing from the Premier League. So there was all of that stuff. There was this hard kind of situation where it was difficult for them to differentiate the private investment fund from the state, and that's obviously been a problem as well. But for me, what we've seen over the last 48 hours, and again, Harry, correct me if I'm wrong, is it become abundantly clear that the only thing holding this back was money, was the TV rights issue, was the issue of piracy, and the Premier League didn't approve it from fear of losing one of their big broadcast partners. Because the minute we heard that that ban had been lifted on beIN Sports in Saudi Arabia, the talk about the takeover was back on, and 24 hours later, bang, it's done and dusted. So does it worry you as a Newcastle fan? Obviously, you're happy that Ashley's gone and that you've got people that are going to come and, and be more ambitious, hopefully. But does it worry you as a Newcastle fan that or as a Premier League fan and as a human being that there seems to be no regard for all of these other issues that we've talked about, and solely it's about money, it's about rights, and the minute that issue was resolved, the Premier League have opened the door and said, "Go on then, lads."
No, well, yes, it does worry me. Sorry, but it doesn't surprise me. This is the latest in a long line, and I kind of feel like a lot of Newcastle fans are getting accused of whataboutery, but with this sort of thing, there is only whataboutery you can do, because it's so. There is no argument to defend the Saudi Arabian side of this, and you're absolutely right. I think from what I can see, this is just my opinion, but it's a mirage that separation was ever a real issue. And if it was an issue, it was only an issue related to piracy, because if you could separate them, then maybe the Premier League couldn't have a case on piracy. But to me, it's pretty obvious that PIF and Saudi Arabia have links, and yet it doesn't matter, because the Saudi Arabians have, because Saudi Arabia has stopped pirating the Premier League's content now, beIN Sports coverage of the Premier League. Now, if I'm the Premier League, I'm taking beIN Sports side on that, because they're a massive partner, and you have no loyalty to this consortium, and I understand that. And human rights have never come into it from that perspective, beyond a sadly, and they should. They're not involved in the owners and directors test. I'm somebody who wants to listen to Amnesty International, who wants to listen to Jamal Khashoggi's widow, who has been sadly trolled by sections of the Newcastle supporters who just care about who are people that you're describing. They just care that a new owner's coming in and that they get to watch a rich football team. I'm somebody who's very, very conflicted over a lot of stuff, and I'm also not entirely sure I really trust the Saudi Arabian the public investment fund section of the consortium, because of things that I heard, that in terms of they couldn't necessarily get through to Amanda Staveley, or Amanda Staveley couldn't reach them all the time during the 18 months when things were a bit silent. So, and it wasn't guaranteed for a long period that they were going to stick around, despite what they say now. I think that's so I do have worries, and I'm absolutely on board with the concerns that everybody has, because yes, they're absolutely legitimate, but also, I think it's a bit harsh to then say, specifically on Newcastle fans, you need to be a moral guardian of this. When, the Man City takeover happened 10 years ago, no one really said much at the time about Man City. And Chelsea's been 20 years in the making. Football has been going on this journey. This is effectively that we've started. Football as a collective has started crying about it because the tiger that we fed and nurtured has bit us on the head. That's effectively what's happened here. And also, it's a societal thing because this country sells arms to Saudi Arabia. So how can, if the Premier League are okay with it, and if the government are fine selling arms to Saudi Arabia and trading with Saudi Arabia, how can it be on the Newcastle fans to make a stand here? But also that doesn't mean they need to be dressing up as Mohammed bin Salman, as somebody did yesterday, having a Saudi flag on their bio on Twitter, and as I say, trolling Khashoggi's widow, because as a journalist, that is a particularly heinous crime. What happened there? So the only thing you can do as a Newcastle fan is educate yourself and as a football fan generally is educate yourself and try and understand what's going on and condemn it but that doesn't. If the other option is to not support your team because of something that's completely out of your control, and also Newcastle fans protested for 15 years almost against Mike Ashley, and it didn't make a bit of difference. I don't think protesting here would make a bit of difference. It might principally show things, but I think if you're asking Newcastle fans to not support their team over something that they can't control, then it's where do you draw the line? Especially because football has kind of all contributed to this. If you look at into human rights records of other things, obviously, I think Saudi Arabia is a specific case, and it needs to be treated as that. But there isn't a right answer here either, and the only way forward is to getting through this minefield is trying to educate yourself on what's gone on here. I don't really know what the right answer is because the right answer from the human rights aspect is to just stop supporting your football club, which I think every single football fan across the country, if you were told that you shouldn't support your football club, I think you would rail against that in some form.
Yeah, it's not something you can just switch on and off when you feel like it.
Yeah.
And I get that. And listen, when I say, do the things that, are going on in the background or that are alleged to have gone on in the background concern you, I don't expect you or any other Newcastle fan to say, we don't want to be more competitive. We don't want to have greater finance at our disposal. We don't want our club to do well now because of who runs it or who owns it. I completely get that. And I also think you made a really valid point when you said about the Man City takeover, because that's a similar thing. All right, some of the violations are maybe not as clear and obvious, but the people don't get to that kind of wealth without having something questionable in their past. I would argue, we're talking about royal families here, and royal families will divide opinions, and they will do things that some will see as crimes, and they will do things that others see as things that just needed to be done. I think, we've kind of allowed these big billionaires to come in over the years and take over Premier League football clubs because the Premier League saw it as an opportunity to bring huge and further investment into their competition, which would take it to a new level. And it has taken it to a new level. The Premier League is at a place it's never been before in terms of global appeal, worldwide popularity. It is a huge, huge thing. But it's, on the one hand, I'm sitting here and I'm going, yes, I don't like the look of MBS as he's known, and some of the things that he's supposedly done. I don't like the idea of human rights violations and all of that. But it's a difficult place to be in because I don't expect the Newcastle fans to put that right. But I think there needs to be a review at how this has all come about in terms of the Premier League. And those guys are the ones that I'm holding responsible here. They've done it in the past and it was wrong. But this time I feel like there is just more on paper that makes this feel uneasy and makes this feel uncomfortable. You know, we all know that Roman Abramovich isn't a saint, right? You know, we all know the kind of backstory or alleged backstory as to how Roman Abramovich got his millions. But it's not clear and it's not obvious and it's not there for all to see. You can, you know, you can talk about it. You can, you know, I don't know what's the right word. You can speculate about it, but it's not as clear and obvious as some of the issues that we're talking about with the Saudis. And this for me is the big issue. I mean, taking it away from that, because as I said, I don't expect you to not be happy that Mike Ashley's gone. I don't expect you to you know, to not want your club to do well or any of that. But I think you're one of the level-headed ones, Harry, in that you can see that this is good for the football club, but you can also see the wider picture and maybe have some reservations about some of the other issues in the background. But what's the next step now? Because people are kind of under this impression, given how rich and wealthy these guys are, that Newcastle are going to come in immediately from January. They're going to start spending crazy money, bringing in top players. This man, Steve Bruce, is probably going to lose his job now. I think he is going to lose his job. How quickly do you think how quickly do you think we're going to start to see the knock-on effects of this new ownership in terms of from a football perspective?
Straight away, I think. In terms of Steve Bruce, I don't expect him to be in charge against Spurs.
You think he'll be that quick?
I think it'll be that quick because we spoke about this, you know, last year, Harry, the two of us, and I was for giving Steve Bruce the end of the season, at least. Hypothetically, that was in the middle of lockdown. At the end of the season would have been still 6-9 games, I think, at the time, whenever it came back. But Newcastle were in the FA Cup. They were getting decent results. The performances weren't great, but, you know, fair. You know, I don't think it was unfair to suggest that he probably earned a stay of execution until the end of the season, at least to see out the FA Cup run that he was on at the time. Now, it'd be a PR loss from the consortium's perspective if they kept Bruce on, because the fans, it's easy to turn around. It's an easy thing to do, to turn around and say you've not, you know, to get the fans on side, to get rid of Bruce, because he's kind of become, although it's known he's a symptom of what really the bigger problem was at Newcastle. He's become the focus because tactically he's questionable. A lot of his communication is questionable, and I think in 5 years' time, I personally will probably look back and think and feel a bit sorry for Bruce because of the way that he's been talked about and abused online. It's true, and you know, people accusing him of being, you know, not of X, Y, and Z. And I think actually it's a tough job. It's been a tough job for him because he's more than any manager under Mike Ashley has been left to do all of the talking for the club. But Bruce was told to do that when the takeover was happening. So Ashley was even more removed from everything than he was before, and there was nothing going on around him, and he was basically fielding all these questions. And he's not very good at taking criticism and not very particularly a good communicator, I don't think. So he says some things, but out of the heat of the moment, I think I'll feel a bit sorry for him down the line. But at the moment, there's just no way he can carry on because the fans don't want him. If the Saudi Arabian or the consortium want the game's already sold out. If they want a really electric atmosphere to be at fever pitch at peak level, then they can't have Bruce on the touchline because Bruce will become a focus. There is a sort of understanding more that Newcastle still haven't won a game this season. They're 19th. They're in a relegation battle. It's not guaranteed if they don't pick up points. You know, Callum Wilson is still injured, still our only really good top striker. There are still problems in terms of the football team that can't be resolved until January. The hope is that the change in atmosphere around the club and you know, maybe a change of manager, change, you know, building the training ground, just to sort of building momentum can get a bit of form going until January when the players can be bought. But key to that momentum is getting rid of Bruce. So in terms, I would be surprised if Bruce is in charge by Spurs. I don't, but equally, I don't expect Antonio Conte to be on the touchline either, because it's going to be a gradual process.
Yeah.
So we've got to be realistic about stuff like that. I just don't think Bruce has. I think part of the reason why Bruce was still at the club despite the results was an apparent £8 million payoff that he's due. That Ashley wasn't going to pay it. I think it's necessary that the consortium are acknowledging that. All the noises I'm getting, and crucially what Amanda Staley was saying yesterday, wouldn't comment on Bruce at all. Now, if you kind of back them, you say, well,
You say it, don't you?
you say it, don't you? So I just don't see it. Don't see Steve Bruce being in charge by the Tottenham game, but I don't know who will be. I'd be as interested to know that myself. Somebody in the Northeast press pack has suggested that Brendan Rodgers is on the radar, but he's at Leicester. That's going to take time to, even if you have the ability to get him out of Leicester, which I'm not convinced at the moment Newcastle do. That's going to take time, and that's going to take a lot of negotiation. Steven Gerrard, but the same situation at Rangers. So it would be an out of work manager. Eddie Howe has been previously linked with Newcastle. As one of the alternatives that could possibly come in, in the Ashley era. I honestly don't think there would be much of an aversion to that happening now, despite the change of ownership. But Bruce's days are definitely numbered. Whether it's Tottenham or he's definitely not sticking around. I think he knows that as well.
Yeah, it seems like he does. Let's take some of the comments from the live chat box, and then we'll wrap up with some questions on the takeover or anything that you want to ask. Basically, you can put them in the chat box. Let's see what we've got here. Jack Burgess says, in 5 years when Newcastle win the league, our fans will still be here saying, give Arteta time and we have potential. Any excuse to get an Arteta dig in, who, by the way, just before we went live, was announced as the September Premier League Manager of the Month. There you go. Let's see.
This is genuinely true. He was linked with replacing Benitez, but he rang Benitez and Benitez told him not to take the job.
There you go.
Steve Patrick Vieira as well. Patrick Vieira was another one.
He was told not to take it.
And Benitez told him don't take the job.
Yeah, because of the circumstances. It's one of those environments in which you can't succeed.
You can't. You basically you've got no help, as I said. I alluded to on the with the communication. So Bruce's communicate. Benitez is a genius when it comes to managing the press and the political side of it. Bruce is not a genius. Bruce is an old-fashioned. He comes from a generation where you don't have to do that all the time. He's not particularly comfortable with it, and the scrutiny is more on at Newcastle than most places because you are the only one who's speaking. So you kind of got those. So the chances of success or the whatever counts as success is not worth all of the crap that you have to go through. So I do have some sympathy for Bruce, but both Arteta was a long-term target. We spoke to Vieira before McLaren as well, I think, and then he was linked with replacing Bruce. But yeah, I can't. It's interesting to me that Vieira has gone to someone like Palace, who are effectively in the same sort of bracket as Newcastle. But that's kind of you can't succeed. So Arteta's an interesting case at Arsenal, but I don't know whether he would have taken it regardless of whether he spoke to Benitez or not. But he was a target, and that's kind of where we're at with it. That's kind of what it was like, and now whoever comes in hopefully has a better chance of success.
Yeah, of course. Let's take this one from Matt, who says, I think as Arsenal fans, we need to be honest with ourselves. If this takeover was our club, I think the majority of our fan base would be in favour in it. And yet, look, everybody wants to see their team do well. Everybody wants to see their team compete at the very top. And I can imagine that if you're, and look, this is not to be disrespectful to Newcastle, but we sit here and we moan season after season after season And all of us as Arsenal fans have seen our club win multiple major trophies. When was the last time Newcastle won a major trophy, Harry?
1969 was the Inner City Fairs Cup, which became the UEFA Cup, but the last domestic one was 1955, the FA Cup.
There you go. So Newcastle fans deserve this more than most. And I'm not for a second blaming Newcastle fans here. I just think that this is more an indication of the sad state of modern football rather than it is Newcastle United. And as Harry said, why should Newcastle be the gatekeepers or the ones that are morally responsible for dealing with this? I'm just going to bring in another guest because Mr. Dan DeLuca, one of our regulars on the social club, was watching us live. He sent me a message during the show, so we thought, why not bring him on to get his take on it? Dan, welcome, mate. How are you?
Yeah, very well. It teach me to send him messages during the show.
Yeah, exactly. He's. I hope your boss ain't watching this, but anyway.
I think he subscribes to the channel.
Dan, let's get, before we continue through the chat box, because there's lots of opinion in there, and we'll come on to some of that in just a couple of moments. But what's your take on the Newcastle takeover? Because I don't like it, but I get why Newcastle fans like it. And equally, I don't think they're responsible for the issues. Therefore, we can't blame them. Harry sees it, I think pretty similarly, but he's obviously a Newcastle fan, so has a lot more to gain from it. Where are you on this?
Obviously, Harry always presents a very, very balanced viewpoint on it on every show we've done with him, which is great. I don't blame the Newcastle fans at all. Why should I? I mean, let's get to the basics of it. Bobby Robson once said words to the effects of, football is about holding your dad's hand around the terraces and falling in love. You support that football club. What goes on behind the scenes is more and more visible these days. And actually, I don't really care. I want to go, I want to watch the game, I want my team to play well, and I want to do whatever I do after the game. So it's not Newcastle's fault. They shouldn't be interested in what goes on behind closed doors. Like you said earlier in the show, obviously, there are elements of this that are more publicised, but, let's have it right. Ashley wasn't an angel. So from a Newcastle fan's perspective, what they see is the first thing they will see is on the football pitch, we are terrible. We have been for 15 years. In 10 years' time, we're not going to be terrible anymore. That's really exciting. They should be very, very happy. I've got no issue with that. Where my issues will inevitably arise is what happens from this point onwards. And they've already started. And this is, I don't expect Newcastle fans to take the moral high ground in terms of political issues and human rights issues, because there are established bodies around the world to do that. But in terms of football issues, to some extent, I do. So, for example, we've already seen Amanda Staveley this morning playing cliche bingo. Newcastle fans deserve to be top of the league. Why? Compared to who? Compared to which set of fans who haven't just been bought out? I can't accept stuff like that. To be honest, I find that extremely disappointing. Everyone's favourite pundit, solely because he was a good footballer, Alan Shearer, straight away, very quick to stick his boot into the European Super League plans. Essentially, without being called a Super League, the Premier League is now 4/12 of the way into that, because there's relegation and promotion. Doesn't really a great deal of odds. Don't start throwing Leicester at me. Leicester happened once. It might happen once again. Abolishing the Super League just because that happens once every quarter of a century isn't really good enough. So I'd be a bit disappointed with that. And I can't subscribe to this theory that Newcastle United deserve this more than any other club. I get the suffering. I get that they were poorly owned before. Well, let's have it right. So have Leeds United. So have Nottingham Forest. This is not about criticising Newcastle because of their size. They're a massive city and a well-supported football club. Single club cities tend to be, and good luck to them. But that's, for me, where the moral high ground shift is a little bit less acceptable in my mind. We can't have this public outrage similar to fans, I suppose, about picking on Newcastle. There are fans now who are very, very angry about this. We both know full well that the majority of football fans would accept this if this was their club. And I'm sure your comments in the chat from Arsenal fans accept that. We're very much in a can't beat them, join them sort of world now. But when I hear the comments of Amanda Staveley, I just expected an awful lot more than that generic sort of nonsense. that's what's disappointed me the most in the last day. I don't blame the Newcastle fans. I expect Harry, with a measured viewpoint, to be very, very excited, and I'm sure you'll put a curb on that excitement for reasons you discussed earlier in the show. But that's where it gets really, really cloudy for me, that we now have to subscribe to this theory that Newcastle fans deserve this takeover more so than any other club, and furthermore, going into the future, when Newcastle do start winning things, the inevitability of how fans behave in that circumstance is what will turn Newcastle from being a very popular club and an institution of British football to a club that people don't like very much.
Harry, do you agree with what Dan said there? Do you disagree with some of it? What's your kind of take?
No, I see his point, because I think Newcastle fans are going to lap up anything that Amanda Davies says, effectively because she's not Mike Ashley, and she's positioned herself fairly well in the last 4 years. We're actually, it's talk about the 18 months, but really she turned up against Liverpool in a 1-1 draw in 2017, having been invited by Rafa Benitez, funnily enough, and watched the game and tried to buy the club. Made the bid on her own back, was called a tire kicker by Ashley, went away, and then came back with the wealth fund, and then this happened. And then as we said, the reason why I don't buy that separation was ever really an issue, given how quickly this has gone through, because of the since the piracy. As you said, it was a day, not even that really. It was less than a day till we knew that it was going to happen, and it was only a matter of time. And then another day later, and here we are. So she's presented herself very, very well over the last 4 years, and Newcastle fans have, like a lot of things that happen in politics as well. It's very easy just to sort of and even elsewhere in football, somebody will say something that if you don't like them, then you'll have an issue with it. So if you like them, that's just the way it kind of works. So I don't disagree with what Dan's saying, and I don't, I think most Newcastle fans will say that they deserve it more because they felt, just like I think any other club would say they deserve it more because they're focused on what they feel, and they see it from their perspective. And our perspective, and the Newcastle fan perspective, has been, misery while watching other clubs. Spurs, taking Spurs as an example. I think as a way of describing where Newcastle were when Ashley took over compared to Spurs, the revenue was I think Newcastle were ahead. Now we're 4 times behind. And that's kind of just an example of the stagnation compared to somebody like Spurs. And then also watching West Ham bid 20 million for 2 players this summer or whatever, that sort of thing. So it's very easy for Amanda Staveley to come out and say not very much and become very popular. And I do understand why. I do understand why your point about Newcastle not deserving it more. But also, I think that's to do with that's a lot of things that's to do with perception, because Leeds came up and everyone was like, Leeds deserve to be back, and you could argue that Nottingham Forest, you can pick other clubs as well. So,
yeah, I was very against that then, but I think in terms of, especially with the Leeds thing, it's like, well, we deserve it. Why? Because our fans have been there through some really, really dark times. Okay, yeah. I get that. But I look at this. Let's link this back to Arsenal, and this is a view of mine. It's easy at the minute. I look at Newcastle getting big, and my first impact is, well, it's going to be even harder for Tottenham now to compete. Okay, some may say unlucky, tough, should have managed your own club better. Ironically, you have to be with respect, you have to be a small size club in value to get bought out. Chelsea were not massive. Manchester City were bought because they were cheaper than Manchester United. And
Newcastle have been bought effectively because they're
under the value they should be for a club of their fan base.
But you can effectively, I think the Saudi Arabians really probably wanted to buy Manchester United and were probably quoted around £3 billion or 300 million. and get them and spend another few hundred and get them on a similar level. It's quite easy to do.
So that's unfortunate. It's unlucky, but the emergence of Manchester City finished Arsenal Football Club as a challenge, and they still haven't recovered from that. In the sense that Manchester City came in at a time when Arsenal had gone from first to second to third. Champions League places had gone from 2 to top 3 to top 4, so Arsenal were still able to extend qualification for a period of time. Then Manchester City came in and they bought 3 or 4 of their first team players. And Arsenal as a football club have not recovered to that size because of that. So I look at this and say, West Ham are a very similar sort of club in that they don't like their owners. They don't know what they get. They haven't historically liked the sort of managers they've seen on the touchline, and they haven't performed at a level that they believe their club should perform. What does this do to a club like West Ham, who have now worked through those differences? They've brought themselves up. They've brought themselves up to a place where they're mixing it around 6th or 7th. They've got a really good, exciting side, good prospects, stadium, sizable, revenue, big. Leicester City missed out on the Champions League twice narrowly for the last 2 seasons. They've built themselves up properly. They've built themselves organically. Everyone speaks highly of what their owners do. What happens to them?
Why is that? But why is that Newcastle's problem?
No, but that's where the moral debate comes in for me.
But didn't the moral debate end when Roman Abramovich came in and took Chelsea from being on the brink of disappearing as a football club to now competing for the biggest trophy?
Yeah,
we're too far down the line now to look back and say, yeah, but what about West Ham? What about Leicester that have done it? And I quote properly, Leicester have spent an absolute shitload of money and they've got extremely wealthy owners. They haven't done it organically. So we're too far down the line to be looking at other clubs and going, what does this mean for them? Like, I'm an Arsenal fan and I know that this makes it more difficult in the coming years for Arsenal to get back in the top 4. But I can't sit there and say, question the morality of it when we're already far down the line and around the corner. That ship's already sailed.
No, but I guess my point is, and what makes me cross is we're all happy to step out and throw our hat into the ring when a European Super League's about to be formed. Because for whatever reason, something like this is allowed to happen, and we're worried about how Saudi Arabia run their country. Like, that is low down the list, should be lower down the list of a football fan's worries, in my view. So the likes of the people I'm cross with is Alan Shearer. People like Alan Shearer. Probably Gary Neville, I haven't heard what he's about to say yet, but he's the sort of person who would annoy me. And I just worry that the game has missed an opportunity that certain figureheads promised us after the European Super League were broke down, which was, we are going to reorganise and fundamentally readdress football from top to bottom following this. And what the first thing that's happened is the Premier League have gone in and overturned a sportingly unethical takeover bid, in my view. And people will say, you're jealous because it's not Tottenham. That's fine. Maybe I am jealous that Tottenham haven't got the ability to compete in that way. But I would be just as big a hypocrite if I turned up in 10 years' time and started ramming home abuse to Sunderland fans because it just so happened to be my team that won the lottery. I think football has gone back on its word of the last 6 months. It's unfortunate that Newcastle are the brunt of that. In some respects, they won't care because they get the benefits. But that's the point I'm trying to make here, and I think it's all well and good to talk about, you know, how Saudi Arabia and their human rights record and all that sort of stuff. But actually, just looking inwards at home, I think we've been let down by English football once again.
Harry, coming back to you, mate, in terms of this, and I had, when I was thinking about what I wanted to ask you earlier on, I did write down the 2 words Super League. And what I want to, I guess, gauge from you is Newcastle were one of the clubs that really didn't want the Super League. You know, they probably weren't invited to it, with all due respect, but they were one of the clubs that were quite big on the idea of this Super League and being a really bad thing for football. How does this compare? How does something like this compare to the idea of the Super League to you? Because essentially, by allowing people to take control of our football clubs that are so much more wealthy than everybody else, we are creating elitism, aren't we? So how do the two kind of compare for you?
The only literal difference for me is the promotion and relegation thing, and rightly or wrongly, I think really that's what people. I'm not saying I do, but I think a lot of people on the sort of really vocal level objected to that you couldn't get through because effectively the same thing. If you watch the Fever Pitch documentary, a lot of the same things were being said on BBC about the Premier League. A lot of things were being said at the same time in 1992, but the difference, and I think Gary Neville actually said this about the Super League in his defence of, in his critic of the Super League, not criticising the Premier League, was the promotion and the lack of promotion and relegation, the cut-off. But I understand principle. I completely get Dan's point that effectively this is what's going to happen now. There's going to be a cut-off of 16. They'll just happen to play the other teams in the set, and it'll become. So I do get that. I think it's impossible for me to argue against it. As I say, it's a minefield this now, and it is very, very difficult. I can't say that this is that this. I would happily have a world where this is a test of Newcastle, specifically for Newcastle. This is a test of Newcastle's the fans' previous suggestion that they only wanted a team that tried. They only wanted to go in the top 8 or challenge or feel like there was something to hope for, because that's not going to. We're in a different world now. That's not even that. Like if Newcastle finish 8th in 2 years' time, that'll be a major failure because of the wealth. So there's a real test of what Newcastle fans have got. I think Newcastle fans have got to hold on to, but I don't think they will, because I don't think any fan would. I think Man City fans are more insufferable now than they were 10 years ago. Newcastle fans, my dad tells me, were pretty insufferable in the mid-90s. Pretty disrespectful, saying Sunderland wasn't a rival. We only care about Manchester United. So it's all circumstantial. But I think at the end of the day, fundamentally, aside from the promotion and relegation thing, most fans just care about winning games and spending big money and trophies and stuff. And I think really anything I see the point. Anything beyond that's kind of hypocritical because Newcastle aren't. I don't think Newcastle are any longer going to be able to say that they demand a team that tries, not a team that wins in 5 years' time. Because I just think that that's just the way things work. Yeah. Liverpool fans have suddenly become apparently more insufferable now than they were 10 years ago because they've got a good team. That's just how it works, unfortunately.
Do you know the best thing about this whole takeover? The irony of this whole takeover is, in terms of Mike Ashley, now in 10 years' time, there's not going to be a single branch of Sports Direct that doesn't sell a Newcastle shirt. The man is a genius. He will make more money from Newcastle now than he did yesterday.
Well, he's. So I read someone tweeted yesterday, and I thought it was quite, probably quite accurate, or it will come to be quite accurate in the coming years. It was something along the lines of Mike Ashley basically has used Newcastle United as a advertisement for his sports company.
Have you not seen inside St James's Park? It's not as bad as it was. On the top of the Gallagher end, there used to be you could see it from bird's eye view. Sportsdirect.com. They replaced the old Newcastle United thing on the east stand opposite, which is the one you see, smaller one that you see on the TV. And he replaced it and wrote in Sports Direct numbering Newcastle United with Sports Direct on either side of it. So he has literally, and it is all over the stadium. It's all over everywhere. I mean, he literally called it the Sports Direct Arena. And before that, I'd changed the name to sportsdirect@stjamespark.com. Or
it's even worse.
Yeah, that was in 2000. So that's all. So he has absolutely he stripped the club back and used it. That's what he did. But at the same time, you can't turn around and say, I don't think you can turn around and say we've got our club back, which is what a lot, and those people on the TV who are singing that are probably not aware of the human rights side of what MBS is, but I don't think they really think beyond, winning.
What you said before was perfect though, when you said top 8 now wouldn't be acceptable.
Precisely, that's what I mean.
You haven't got your club back. You've got a different club.
Yeah, precisely.
Exactly.
That's what I'm saying.
There comes different pressures.
But equally, it's gone from not being our club over the last 14 years to just not being our club in a different way. And I think a lot of people, naturally, because that's just the way people think, they'll be happier about it. Well, at least we're winning, at least we're spending money. And
you would have Tottenham, wouldn't you? Would have Tottenham in the first game, like typical, absolutely.
Yeah,
Well, you're lucky you've got them now before they start signing top
but come on,
players.
Dan. I mean,
No,
like,
they'll be massively boosted, won't they? There'll be
Callum
like
Wilson's still not
fans.
fit. We're
There'll
gonna
be
still-
fans singing, and I'll tell you honestly, I would love it if we beat you. Love it.
The thing is, Callum Wilson's still not fit. So we'll have Jeff Hendrick in midfield. So it's effective. Like that, there is a sort of like a serious point to that, is that there is going to have to be a temper to how quickly this thing goes anyway, in the immediate term, in terms of we can't go and buy players. So, and we still haven't got a first win, so we can't really look beyond. And what was also quite ironic was a lot of people are saying like the three people who were interviewed at St James's Park yesterday by Sky Sports said, "What do you want for this season? Just stay up this season. We'll go then." And it's like, it's hard to disagree with what you're saying, Dan, because effectively, I think a lot of people are trying to build themselves around this and adapt themselves to this and try and naturally that's going to make people hypocritical.
Yep.
But yeah, but what you said about Amanda Staley, she doesn't have to say anything beyond the cliches. It's just that easy for her because of how bad Mike Ashley has positioned himself and how easily she's positioned herself over those 4 years. Over those 4 years, with her previous bids, she's always been seen as this sort of like, she's this guardian angel who's waiting in the wings.
Yeah, Mike Ashley's made her look good, hasn't
And
he? Without having to do a great deal.
Has done that himself to a degree. Because the thing about Mike, the thing is true for me. Mike Ashley's ownership could have been so different because he proved in 2-3 seasons. The 2 seasons, ironically, I mean, he put us in the championship, but the 2 seasons we were in the championship. First time he put the money up to keep the core, the Kevin Nolans and the Joey Bartons, the key players who were in their prime. They were Premier League quality players, and they had the right sort of mentality, and they got us back in the Premier League. The second season, he backed Benitez, and in the middle of that, we finished 5th, and he got the principle. His principle was correct, but his execution was off. So it could have worked. If someone came, my point is, if someone came in with his wealth or even less, but tried harder, it would have succeeded. It would have worked. This is now a different fish. This is now we can't talk about, as Dan rightly pointed out, we can't talk about finishing the top 8 anymore. We've got a different club now overnight, and we're going to have scrutiny on people saying a lot of stuff, and we're going to have to probably learn a lot from a lot of Man City fans and a lot of Chelsea fans of how to deal with that sort of thing.
There's a lot more of you guys, though, at least, so you can strengthen numbers.
But I think there is a perception that Newcastle, rightly or wrongly, that Newcastle are this club that it's an authentic club, therefore it's different. I don't know whether that's a bit like Leeds coming up, and like plenty of clubs have been out of the Premier League for a long time, but not got the same reception that Leeds have got since they come back up. And I don't know I think it is just that this idea of authenticity, and whether that's real or not, I don't know. But it's such there's no straight answer to anything, really.
No, there isn't. There isn't, and that's why it is such an intriguing subject, and it's why, even though we are an Arsenal podcast, I felt that it was worth discussing, worth talking about. And Harry, we're going to leave it there, but I just want to say thank you for coming on and providing, as always, some excellent insight into what's going on. And yeah, it's been a great chat. I hope our listeners have enjoyed it. If you haven't done so already, make sure you hit that like button on the video. It really, really does help. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. We are approaching 17,000 on YouTube alone, but we're not quite there yet. We're still around about 175 away from that. And we'd love to get there within the next couple of weeks or so. So please do hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you're new. If you'd like to be a member, you can do so by clicking on the link in the description. Harry, just let people know how they can follow you and keep up to date with the great work you do.
I'm on Twitter at Harry DeCosemo, and everything's pretty much there. So just follow me on there, and you'll get it all.
Make sure you do. Harry does some great work for a number of different outlets, including the BBC as well. So make sure you check out all the fantastic stuff that he does. We're going to be back a little bit later on with another live stream. So stay tuned. We'll be live at 4:15 p.m. UK time, that is. We'll be bringing you the next in our player review series. We'll be talking about Martin Odegaard on that episode, and we might pay a little bit of a tribute to Mikel Arteta, who's just been named September Premier League Manager of the Month. You got to take the wins when they come, given how things have been the last couple of seasons. We'll be back very, very soon with more. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Hit the like button on the way out, and I'll catch you all soon. Goodbye.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner, the Arsenal podcast.
I'm Martin Tyler, and you're listening to Harry Symeou.